Hi everyone, welcome to what doing AML actually looks like. Accountants Forum number 6. We're going to walk through some live scenarios with real-world scenarios with clients, and we'll go through that as best we can to step you through the process on what it's going to look like for a couple of different scenarios today. I am joined by Ags from LYRA Risk and Compliance. Welcome, Ags.
Thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, sorry. I have been on these a few times, so I don't particularly want to repeat myself if you don't know who I am. But thank you, Clayton. Hi, everyone. My name is Agnieszka Szczepanik, or Ag or Ags. I've been working in financial services and banking for a very, very long time, 22 years. And in particular, financial crime risk. So I've been implementing solutions to help mitigate the risk exposure in banking globally and in Australia. And I started up my own consultancy, LYRA Risk and Compliance, to support the new Tranche 2 entities coming on board, because I think there is a wealth of experience that myself and other providers who may have this experience as well from financial services have come. And I just want to make sure we make the world a safer place. So if I can add value in everyone being compliant with these regulations, it helps our communities and it helps our clients to have a much safer life. It's saving us from the terrible outcomes of financial crime risk.
100%. Appreciate it. Get my computer going. So today, less theory, more of what does it look like. Some real world scenarios, walk through end to end. When a client joins us, we will try and keep this to 30 minutes. Stick around with some Q&A. I'm sure you've got a bunch of questions. There's so many questions happening every day in the different forums. In this case, we're going to go through 2 different leads with a similar intake form for each person.
Same process, Same process. Same process, yeah.
Same process. And then what that looks like for each potential client of yours. And then Ags will talk into that. For you, yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. So just before we go through, just a couple of things. So I think there's a common misconception by everyone, certainly from the individuals that I talk to, and both from my clients and just generally in the industry sphere, that AML is either binary. So it's either really, really simple, or it's impossibly complex, and everyone is kind of grappling with that dichotomy. So I think the truth is that it's both, right? It is for 90% of your business, it will feel like this slide or this process is for Sarah Wilson, who's a low risk customer, who's local, who wants a standard Pty Ltd, right? Because the 90% of the business will be clean, domestic, straightforward. It might even be 95%, it might be 98%, it might be 100%. You don't know until they walk through your door, right? And I call this, so meet the Sarah Wilson. So she's a client that we all want. She's local Melbourne or local domestic, wherever you may be in Australia. She's a standard Pty Ltd formation, because you've got tech that works and it takes you through that process. And we'll talk through the process a little bit later. We've got some slides that break it out. The boxes all get ticked, everything is fine. And you've got this assumption, oh, well, if Sarah's fine, everything's going to be fine, because you do more and more like this. And I call this the 90% illusion, right? So if you apply the kind of to the simple flow, on day one, you identify the designated service, you know what you're giving them, company formation, maybe secretarial, maybe a registered office. So she's a sole director. The beneficial ownership is clear. It's a straight line, straight through to Sarah. This triggers, you then go through understanding a little bit more information around what country they operate in. Country operation is Australia. You do a simple ID check, you do an asset register check, you're done, right? So and we'll talk about the process in a little bit more, but at a high level, it's a simple flow. The decisioning is fairly simple, almost none. The system will walk you through the process, right? It's, for these type of clients, the framework isn't the hurdle, right? I call it, it's your basic flow. Whereas when we look at more complexity, so if we just go to the next slide, Do we have both the slides back to back?
Sorry, yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, cool.
There we go.
Then if we compare it to the Marcus Reid, right? So which is a high risk scenario. And when I look at the two things, and it's quite different, right? You could see that Marcus is complex entity onboarding. There is a linkage to international through Singapore. It is a very different type of an onboard, even though the process is the same. And this is the hard truth, I think. You know, AML compliance doesn't fail in the 90 to 95% of customers that you have. It fails in that 1 to 5 or 8% that you didn't expect, right? It's the exceptions to the rule. And you don't know about that 1%, right, until you're in the middle of it, right? Which is really key to understand that gamut, right? That scale of easy, 90%, majority of it will be here, but the risk and the gray lives in that 1 to 5, or maybe none. You may never have a customer that walks through your door that is this complex. Happy times, right? But you never know until you do, and you need to be prepared for that. So in contrast, you've got here, you know, Marcus Reid. We were playing with a couple of different names. I have Andrew Smith on my notes. So Marcus Reid, Andrew Smith, you know, it is very different, right? So this is the kind of engagement that might keep people up at night, because it's a completely different financial architecture, you know, Singapore based. He's got a link to BVI, British Virgin Islands. So that's a tax haven and banking secrecy jurisdiction, you know, Spidey alert, danger, right? You have, there's a complex, you know, restructure request. You can see the amber, you've got already looking at your risk is increasing as you go through the process. You've got beneficial ownership mapping that is no longer in a straight line. It's an opaque chain, right, with interlinked entities. So by stage 4, and I'm kind of giving you the big picture before we go into the detail, by stage 3, you're hitting amber. The beneficial owner mapping is no longer a straight line. It's a bit of an opaque chain of interlinked entities. And this is the thing, right? You know, risk lies in layers and less transparency, which is greater opacity, as we say in financial crime risk, where you just may not be able to ascertain easily the information at those layers. And, you know, each layer then has its own BOs, it has its own holding companies. So you've got to delve down to the murky underworld of all that information on where you have these particular type of structures. It may be that you won't. Some of the accountants that I'm working for absolutely do, because they have quite a lot of international exposure, right? As soon as you have international exposure, that also, you know, breeds greater risk, right? So then from amber, you see that you've got a foreign PEP, and don't worry, there's a lot of info on the slides, so we'll break it down. I just wanted to give you guys the big picture. From amber, from stage 5, you see that you've got, you know, you've got an international PEP, a foreign PEP. Foreign PEP already drives your risk automatically to high. If you're high risk, you need to do enhanced due diligence. So then you've got to start asking more information around where the money's coming from, and where is so source of wealth, source of funds. So how did he actually accumulate the wealth, and where is the money coming from for that transaction? So if you look at the kind of technology versus judgment, right, Adaj, so technology handles the Melbourne thera very, very easily, right? But it can't replace your judgment here, which is why it's important to understand all the nitty-gritty of the information of the act. As I always say, the act is words on paper until you translate it into a process and into the doing and understanding what it actually means for you. And the act is quite high level. The rules support it, but you actually need the flows to understand how all those things link together.
And it comes back to that risk approach, Ags. Like, what you're talking into there is, it's not, you're saying about, it's not just yes and no's. It's not just if this, then, you know, one equals one plus one equals 2. It's a risk-based approach, and each risk factor determines till the end of the decision point.
Yeah, so there are different components of your risk assessment, of which you will define as part of your process. So you either have a standalone risk assessment, and that's for customer. We're talking customer risk assessment right now. That drives your customer risk. That helps you define high, medium, low. But your technology vendor, Seamlss here, will absolutely help you with that. So they'll ask certain questions, you'll get certain answers, and you'll agree what the setting is that will drive you to high, medium, or low, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the key thing really on this example is it's also a culture shift, right? That we're moving away from just collecting information and data points to really applying a different lens around understanding the risk. And so AML overall doesn't test you in the easy cases. It tests you for how prepared you were for the ones that you didn't expect that are a lot harder. And as you've seen, with CBA and Westpac and majority of banks really globally, I can't think of any bank that hasn't been fined or isn't under an enforceable undertaking. And the banks have been doing this since the late 90s internationally, and in Australia since early 2000s. So they've had a lot of time and money to get it right, and they're still getting it wrong. So there is something to be said in the fact that, your majority of your flows, majority of your customers will be the easy one, but it's understanding what you need to do when you have the hard ones, right? I think we should maybe just go through to the next slides as well. So this is the 2 high-level cases. So we've got the 7 steps, give or take. You might kind of have them in a slightly different way in your process flow, but essentially the customer journey, as I like to call it, is usually there's an inquiry for services. You then check on your list. And you should probably do a mapping as well. We're working with one of my clients where we're getting all the products that they do, and we're mapping them against each of the designated services to understand which of those products. You might have some more complex products as well. Some of them might actually map to 2 different designated services. So which designated services do you provide? As soon as you provide a designated service, the rest of the services don't really matter, because the point is you're already putting them through the process, through the AML pipe. You need to work out what is their identity, and you do identification and verification, what we sometimes call ID and V. If they are an entity, you need to collect the beneficial ownership structures, which goes to UBO's ultimate beneficial ownership. That's 25% up in Australia. So anyone that holds ownership within an organisation that has a 25% or greater. You then review which country that comes from. Country risk we have a whole lot of lists that tell us, well, not a whole lot of lists, we have a couple, but we're going into the Basel list for this process as defined by AUSTRAC. The Basel has a lot of different jurisdictional ratings around which countries rate higher than others when it comes to money laundering and financial crime risks. So then you get a country risk rating, which helps to also design, which is part of your overall customer risk assessment. You then look at a few different scenarios, different components of your customer around where they're incorporated, what kind of individual they are, what are their business. And then that helps define your own risk rating for that customer. Then you complete your customer due diligence, and then you get a decision. So let's go through the process steps now.
So we'll go through Sarah Wilson first, Ags. She's a new lead. She's come on board. She says, I want a new company, and we're going to assess whether we want to help this person and engage in that designated inquiry. So obviously you could use a tool like Seamlss to capture that lead and then start having that interview process. They submitted the form and said, oh, we want a new company, and that's what you determined and proposed to them. And you're going to step through that process from lead to a designated service. So designated services item 6 and 9. So we're going to build a company for Sarah, and we might also in turn want to be the registered office. So that's going to create ongoing what do you call it? Checks.
Ongoing customer due diligence. Yes, exactly. So yeah, which and it depending whether she's high, medium, or low. And if you take on AUSTRAC's approach, high being 1-year annual reviews, medium being 2-year reviews, and low being 3-year reviews. So you kind of follow the process. You've confirmed the designated service. You then move on to your identification and verification on Sarah.
I just want to touch on that registered office part. So
Sure.
what Ags is talking about there is when the risk rating comes back as a low, the ongoing monitoring can break out to every 3 years. You can do it more often. It again comes back to your firm risk choice ratings and settings.
When you design your risk assessment, right, and you should have a document that is your risk assessment as well as a document that's your AML program. And then the risk assessment and the program are both effectively operationalized through the flow, which is what we're doing right now. It's the operationalization of what you design on your risk assessment and what you design for your AML CTF program. So then the next step is, sorry, you go.
You're right. We're going to do the ID, beneficial ownership. So obviously we're setting up the company. So we know Sarah is going to be the 100% owner. Makes it really easy. We do an IDV through Seamlss, and then we confirm that, you know, all of the stuff is, she is who she says she is. She's in Australia. We already know that's going to be a low risk assessment. There's no foreign jurisdiction. So it's going to come back low, as Ag said, like it's low risk. The risk rating overall, you know, her PEP and her sanctions, we've got that through Seamlss as well. And that's come back as clear. Nothing alerting us there. So, you know, standard CDD is fine. You could do enhanced if you wanted. Ags was discussing that earlier around enhanced due diligence, including adverse media if you wanted to.
You can uplift, and this is the thing with these kind of regulations, which is a little bit different than I think all the other regs, right? You have an act, you've been told to take a risk-based approach. That is very big, right? You've got carte blanche. In parts of the Act and in parts of the rules, there are certain statements made, right, around what constitutes the minimum standard. So a risk-based approach, you have to take a risk-based approach where you've got to design a risk assessment that will help you decide whether someone's high, medium, or low. And then that annual review is 1, 2, and 3. That's all your risk approach. So you need to document that and make sure you take that as a minimum. You can always uplift and go higher, right? And as part of your risk assessment, some of the work I've been doing, you know, is around what are the no-goes? Where will you absolutely say, that's it, I'm not going to onboard this customer, see you later, bye-bye, with the right language, obviously. Versus, oh, this is actually a bit more nuanced. I'm going to escalate this to my AML compliance officer, and they're going to help me make the call whether we want to keep them on board. They might be high risk, or you might just either offboard them or not take them on board. But that is part of your risk assessment and your program, so you can work out what your risk appetite is around certain things.
With the what was the thing called? Damn it, adverse media. So with the adverse media, Ags was telling me that there is some apps out there that will do an adverse media check on every single time. Now, I've discussed this with Daniel and our provider, and we're not doing that in Seamlss because of the false positives. So an adverse media is a very broad search, and you will get a lot more false positives, and that's just going to create more work. And personally, I'm not about creating more work for us. We're already busy enough. So we will have the option to include it, but by default and standard, I don't recommend it because of that false positive problem. I don't see why you would do that. But we can talk about that more in the at the end. We should keep going through the slides. Sorry, Ags.
I think you might say that that if someone's coming up medium, or if there are certain risk indicators that may drive you to want to do an adverse media check, do an adverse media check, right? Because so maybe it's a nuance thing where there is a button that you guys go, actually, let's do an adverse media. Something doesn't smell right.
It's like anything, isn't it? It's the vibe. It's the vibe. With Sarah, she's a low. You know, we're gonna apply a 2-year annual review for her risk assessment. With
no, it is a low. It's 1 year annual. It's a 3-year.
It doesn't have to be though. It depends on your firm setting.
Too, absolutely. And you may want to do it at the start where you uplift your ongoing, or the term is periodic review cycles, to a little bit higher, so that until you have, you're a little bit more embedded and settled. You've got a sustainable program and a sustainable operating model, and that's when you can then go, okay, well, I'll just downgrade that to a 3 later because it feels quite, quite clean cut.
Love it. And now we'll move on to the Marcus, who's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Similar practice, but yeah, we'll walk through it. Like, old mate's come along. He wants to restructure. He's got a trust set up and substantial fees, partners, companies, all that sort of stuff.
And also, he's been referred by one of your partners. So one of your partners in your firm refers him and goes, great guy, played golf with him for years. Absolute sound bloke. Wouldn't hurt a fly. Just get him on. Sadly, that doesn't fly anymore, and you do need to you will need to take them through the full AML process, right? There is no, I've known him for years, we're best buddies. He's family. He's married to my wife's cousin twice removed, right? That stuff won't hold, right? You need to ID everyone that goes through the because little do you know what he might be involved with. So there is absolutely no, we've known him for years.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. That stuff, forget it.
Not flying.
No.
So the designated service, we've got 3 going on here, Ags. We've got a restructuring with the companies and the trusts, formation of the trust, a registered address ongoing for that company formation. So we're going to have to do a little bit more. It's definitely triggered some designated services. So we're going to put them through the AML pipe. We're going to do an ID, beneficial ownership. So this is the bit where Ags was talking into, it's Amber. So yeah, we can do the ID through Seamlss and we can get those checks pretty easy. But the beneficial ownership was that part where Ags was talking to Amber, where trying to figure out who owns what in his companies, because he's made it so convoluted, it makes it a little bit more
riskier. And look, and I think it's fair to say that AML generally doesn't fail on Sarah unless you haven't completed her information correctly, which is why the banks had to do so much remediation and still are doing remediation, because they didn't capture the right CDD details or it was not updated. It's not, Sarah doesn't fail you, this will fail you. Right? This, because you've got that greater of complexity, you've got different layers, you've got different organizations. And if we go to the next level, as you go through, you realize, can we go to the next slide? You've got a different country involved, and that country is ranked amber. You've got Singapore involved. So you've actually got a Singapore resident, right? He's got a BVI registered company, British Virgin Islands. That's not great, right? A lot of opacity in there, and there's a lot of companies who are, who are money laundering companies who are registered in these tax havens.
Tax avoidance.
Tax havens. Yep. It's a great book, actually. It's called Treasure Islands and the Men Who Stole the World. If anyone wants to do some reading about the setup of the tax havens, apparently facilitated by the Bank of England governor post World War II. But I digress. So you've got links to Singapore. We haven't got that. If you flick back to the top, should we flick back just to the top slide, actually, because all the information's there in the top slide, in the marker slide. Sorry, I'm jumping. We did all this. That one, right? Yep. So you've got a BVI link, right? High. You've got a Singapore, which is a medium, but the BVI takes it to high. So you've obviously got a country risk there is sitting at high, right? You've already got one high risk factor present. Secondly, you've got a complex offshore structure. And as you're delving into that complex offshore structure, you realize that a connected party to one of the accounts is a foreign PEP. So essentially, all those things have ultimately very quickly turned Marcus and his new setup to high. He is a high risk customer. So then you need to follow enhanced due diligence. And enhanced due diligence is hard, And again, the banks have been doing the EDD question has been really hard in a lot of organizations, because it's been tough going out to the customers to say to them, to your clients and bank customers, saying, you need to give me a whole lot of information, right? So when you start going back to your client and there's a bit of pushback, I mean, you just point them straight to financial services and says, actually, this is absolutely the norm. You've been doing this in the banking sphere since 2006. You just may not have been asked that question until now, but it's a part of the global regulations, and it is something that will always be required. And if you're not prepared to go give us that information, we're not going to be able to complete our our processing to understand as per our regulatory obligations, right?
With this, Ag, so we've gotten to the enhanced CDD of, you know, adverse media purchase, but like all of those difficult conversations to have, and we've got to that decision point. Can we have a firm position where if they're a high and they're in the too hard basket, then we just say, see you later? Or, and then there's obviously the other option where you're saying, I'm not going to keep this client, or the person, the
individual, the client,
CMO, what are they, the chief compliance officer,
AML, the AMCO,
the AMCO then has to do the enhanced due diligence, and it's on them to work through that process. And this is the key that I wanted to get across for today.
Can I just so the AMCO doesn't do enhanced due diligence, they check it. So
yeah,
the operations team and technology do that, and then they go, here's all the information that we've collected or we're not able to collect. AMCO, what are we going to do, right? And that's where the risk judgment call comes in. Do I have all the information? Do I know what's happening, right? Does it make sense? If I'm comfortable, do I need to raise a suspicious matter report, right? An SMR. Now, you can raise an SMR and keep the client, right? You can actually go to 6-month reviews. I mean, in the crypto world, majority of the clients and infrastructures are high or even very high because they operate in that high risk part of the market. So you just need to decide whether you're comfortable taking on that risk or not. You can absolutely keep it, or if there's something incomplete, there is risk. There is a if there's any linkages to sanctions, that is a no, right?
Yeah.
Foreign PEPs, okay. You just need to make sure that you're checking that information and have some high level monitoring put on that account, right?
I guess what I'm getting at though, for big firms, people will process it and then take it to the AMCO. But I feel like in smaller firms like me, the admin team may process it, get to that point, oh, it's high, it's in a too hard basket. Clayton, you're the AMCO. Can you progress the next steps and process whether we go forward? Does that make sense? Like, I don't think I'm not going to put that burden on them, especially when you're probably talking 1% of my client base is probably going to hit this position. Like, I don't want to put the burden on the team. I want them to be able to just push through as often as possible on the low options at the same time. Is that kind of?
Yeah, but look, it all depends on on the profile of your customers. Right? If you're predominantly doing business that has linkages to offshore and it's lucrative and you've got the information and you're okay to proceed, you proceed with controls, right? Mm-hmm. Enhanced due diligence is a control because you're monitoring annually, you're doing the adverse media, you've got screening on them, you've understood what the nature of the relationship is, which is all part of your enhanced due diligence, and you've done the source of wealth, source of funds, so you understand where the money's from. That's all okay, right? If it's not part of your, modus operandi for your organization, then you go, actually, this is outside of our risk appetite. We don't need to be having clients from that space. It will be more headache for us than not. We will offboard them or not even onboard them, right? These are your options. It's a risk-based approach, and that's what AUSTRAC wants you to do. They want you to think, not just follow a process, right?
And I think if, like you said, if you are dealing in these scenarios where you have overseas, what an opportunity for your business to be in that niche to support those clients that still want those services and still deserve those services. It's just a matter of making sure that you've got your processes down, that when they hit these checks, that you can just smash through them and make those decisions a bit quicker, whether it's through technology or through a good process to enable that. Is that fair to say?
Well, it's both, right? So technology is a key enabler. But I think people in today's age, because and especially our kids, right, with all the social media, they view technology as the end point. Like, technology is the thing, right? It's the product. Technology is a tool that works within your overall process and governance framework, right, that underpins what you do. And it is a massive enabler. Obviously, I think you really don't want to be doing this without tech. Obviously, you can. But the tech is this bit, and then your bit sits on top. The thinking, the risk analysis, the judgment calls, right? The risk judgment call, the risk lens, as I like to say.
Yes.
That is on you, and that's understanding the gamut, right? And again, once you go through a few of these, you'll understand what I mean, because by, 3 months in, 4, 5, 6 months in, you will absolutely get it, right? And also you can get some, support. So when you do have these queries, I mean, besides me, there are other providers as well where we can support you on an ad hoc basis to come in and have a look and say, I've got this client file, and actually it's a bit of a weird one. Can you help us, get to the bottom of it, right? Okay, we've gone back to here. So
the next decision part, like ongoing, this person, their company, corporate secretarial work will be every year for a review. What would that look like, Ags?
So you would then go back, you'd look at your customer file and you'd go, right, I want to go back and recheck that all their ID information is the same. Are they still structured in the same way? You probably want to have a conversation with them. What has changed in their operations? And does the data that you hold, is it still correct? So that is what the annual review looks like.
So you'd still do your PEPs and sanctions checks, adverse media. You'd run all those again.
So you're running them anyway daily, right? Because what happens is when a client comes on board, the screening that you do is your client versus all the lists, PEPs and sanctions and adverse media, if you decided on the day. And then afterwards, you're going to be doing deltas. So what's the change to the list? So Seamlss will be screening all your customers against all the changes on a daily basis, right? Because there'll be some new, potentially some new names added to the lists that needs to be rescreened. So essentially the screening just continues every day anyway for that entire client relationship that you hold. That's ongoing screening. Yeah. Yep. And is there anything that they do as well in their relationship that make you think, oh, this is a bit weird, like they are not using your product or they're saying certain things that are different to what you'd expect them to be and are different to the expectation of the usage of your service? Those kind of things are triggers that you need to potentially also review. That's called a trigger, their information and where they are and whether they're still high, medium or low. So after that review, you will also have a view as, are they still low? Are they still medium? Are they still high? Does anything need to change?
So they could go down from being medium or high?
It can absolutely go down because information changes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So overall, same process through the same 7 steps, same sequence, obviously the steps at the end, especially with the high, will create a bit more work, but the risk rating obviously determines which way you're going to go with that. And I think most of our work will be how Sarah processed, in that it was a low risk client and things just happen like normal. There's just a few checks along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the depth of the thing, right? So as long as you understand that and understand that where you do have complexity, you're prepared for that complexity, not just systemically, but, operationally. Have you trained your teams? Do they know what they're looking out for? Does everyone understand what governance looks like? How do your escalation flows work? Do people know if they need to turn something around in the day? So we've set up an AML co on escalations. We've got 24 hours, on the AML co reviewing the file, in particular where there's a foreign PEP or something goes to high risk, right? So what's 48 hours, right? So what are your escalation pathways? So it's about understanding how your organization is sitting around the technology. That's, to me, is as important as the technology itself. And the devil is in the detail, right? As I said before, the banks have spent billions, on getting this right. Obviously, their volumes are significantly higher, but even if you extrapolate that downwards, it still holds, right? You will have complexity. Some of you will have greater complexity than others. It may be that you decide, which is where the risk assessment on your organization is important, because it sees how you operate. What is your main bread and butter clientele? Do you want to move into the higher risk space? Fine. Just make sure you understand what you do with that higher risk clientele.
Yep.
And look, and partner liability is personal, as is the AML code. You know, it's a personal and criminal liability. I can't think anyone has been taken to jail yet, but I might be wrong. And AUSTRAC publishes on its website all the different enforcement undertakings and fines, etc. So you definitely don't want to be on that list.
No.
So, you know, I didn't know is not a defense, as we know very well, right?
Yes, 100%.
The whole implementation hasn't been great in terms of, you know, the communications. I have to agree, but you know, there is a wealth of information out there.
100%, 100%. I guess we'll get into some questions. Some people have dropped it into the chat. I'll just run through them quickly. Ags, Kathy Andrews has asked, we need to ID all clients. ATO requires, so we shouldn't need to do this in step 2 with all new clients, regardless of engaging them in designated service. So I onboarded a client a few months ago. I did an ID check because I need to for TPB and ATO. And then they come at me in August for a new company. Do I need to ID them again?
Oh, that's a good question. No, because I'd say the information is still valid. Like, I think it depends on the timing. So if they came in a year later, then yes. But if it happens within the first 3 months, I can check exactly. If the information is still the same, you wouldn't run them through the process again because you've got that information on file. Yeah. But you'd want to check if anything had changed.
I think it also comes back to that July 1st pre-commencement, not required as well. So
until the 1 July, you don't have to do anything.
So I think with that, Kathy, like, it's pre-commencement clients, they're already known to you. You don't need to do the ID again, but you may need enough information in the app like Seamlss to do the PEP and sanction checks for your designated service if they have engaged in one. So they're, again, risk-based approach. And this is the bit that I'm just going to come back to more and more, because so many people are asking random questions now where it's risk. This is all risk-based. It's not yes or no, if this, then that. It's very much risk-based. The more risk, the more likelihood you need to do something. Luke's asked if we're going to show you a bit of Seamlss. Yes, we're going to show you a bit of Seamlss in a minute. Bianca asked about registered office services. No ongoing assessment. When only setting up a company in this? No. The registered office services question again. So from my understanding, Ags, I don't need to just chuck everyone on AML from July the 1st. It's as soon as when the designated when the ASIC re-registration comes up in August, September, July, January, that's when you would do the checks again. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, everything is as you know, everything is as today. You know, truck along exactly as you are, BAU. It's only when something changes to that client that you're redoing the designated service, or there's another designated service, or something changes within their information. That's when the trigger kicks in, and that's when you need to start going through the AML pipe, or when there's a suspicious matter report, which I probably doubt anyone will be raising until they start people going through the pipe, when you kind of saying that. AUSTRAC was very clear recently when he talked to the fund management industry and saying that the amount of SMRs was woeful and absolutely did not represent that they had no risks. How could there be no risks? So just be aware of that. There's nothing wrong with raising an SMR, but there is something wrong with not raising an SMR.
So on the current registered office of clients and reviewing them every 3 years or whatever, the time when you're triggering that review is when they do something. So if they change their address or change director or something that triggers the designated service as the registered office, that's when the 3 years would start again. So you've done the check, and then the 3 years would begin from that point. So the designated service is, I think, from designated service number 9, but if they triggered another designated service at number 3, and they're going to change address and stuff, they've triggered another designated service. You need to do the checks again. It's not the same service. The ongoing monitoring is number 9. The designated service for changing office holders is number 3. It's a new trigger. It's a new pipe. It's a new check. Hopefully everyone understands that they are not mutually exclusive. Is that right? Yep.
Yeah. And look, if the information's the same, you don't need to re-verify, right? Yep. But you do need to check it. That's right.
Yep. Do we need to AML check when we are providing designated services and not for compliance lodgement? Bass. Yeah. Rana, I've said it a million times. If you're just doing tax returns, you don't need to do AML. You just need to do your normal AD checks like TPB. It's only the 9 designated services you need to do. With the checks of companies, if we are registered ASIC agent for the company, we're able to upload company statements as proof rather than pay. I think it's just going through your process with ASIC to see what that check is and where the risk sits, is whether you would pay for additional ASIC searches to be done there. Teresa, like, I'm not sure what that would look like, to be honest, but I think that if there was a high-risk client and you were onboarding them and you didn't have access to their ASIC and you thought, I need to check more into this, then you may need to pay for that report from ASIC to get more information to ensure that you know who the beneficial owner is or something like that, to that effect. If the client can't prove it, then you might need to, but I think that's going to come back to your risk assessment and figuring out that beneficial owner. I believe that's what the question was sitting. Lynn List, how do we check if the relationship with a foreign entity, if they don't tell you? So AGS, they come on board and they've got a relationship.
You've got to ask the questions. So, you know, if they didn't tell me also is not a defense. So what questions do you need to ask to understand where the exposure is? So you've got to build into your team scripts or processes the right questions to be able to determine where there is exposure.
Yeah. Asking, are you a beneficial owner? Do you have a foreign entity or something related to that? Is that kind of what it's saying? Like, are they foreign? Do they have foreign relationships?
Tell me if there is any foreign individuals or entities involved in your structures. Walk me through the process. Ask some general questions around where they operate and what they do, you know, because this is what I was trying to say before. You know, it's not just here's a data point, what do I do? It's about, it is a bit of the vibe of the thing, and I can't believe I've just said that. It is about the entire set of information that you can obtain, so you can make the risk call, right? So what questions do you need to ask?
I think Lynn's sort of saying, what if they hide it from you? What if they say no? Well, you've asked the question. Like,
you've asked the question, absolutely. But you need to have, in that case, I would have something in your procedure or even your tool, right? That says no, nothing, no exposure, right? You need to just document that there is nothing provided to you at that time. Yeah. And then if it comes out that they are, well, hang on, that looks like a suspicious matter, report to me, because they've been lying to you.
But I think it's also like your tools and things will do checks and PEPs and sanctions and things like that as well, and track and log that information for you as a part of that process. And I think that's just it. And having that
absolutely. That adds to your overall information, you know, or we call customer file, right? Customer file holds all that information.
It's in the name, customer due diligence.
It is in the name.
The reception from my Queensland accountant. What do you do with their tax compliance work, but their clients being their own registered office to save money? They often don't keep up things to date. We are missing out on essential info. How do we get them to onboard us to do ASIC? How do you sell ASIC services to someone? That's a whole nother sales call, but basically you need to upsell them on the value of you assisting them in that process. If you are not their registered office and you're not assisting them with their registered office details, you haven't been engaged in a designated service. But I would say that if they are doing it themselves and they stuff it up and then they come to you and say, I need this fixed, it's probably not going to be cheap, and they probably should have got you to do it at the start. So you would obviously on charge all those costs in adding them to your ASIC portal, the ongoing services, the updates, the CDD checks that you need to complete, that they need to pay you for your time. Sassy's asked that we provide a manual. AUSTRAC gave you a free manual of the whole process. Yeah.
So. Well, I mean, look, it's probably not a manual, but, you know, it's given you as much information as any regulator has ever given any industry, right? In terms of the how as well as the what. But it doesn't make it a detailed manual, to be honest. You still have to create something from that.
Yep. Just one. 1 second. I think that's all the questions. If anyone else has got any questions, don't be shy to put them in the chat. Just going to bring up a couple of things here. Come back. Sorry, just organizing my screen. Not winning on this screen front.
Just wondering if there's anything else I should cover while you're searching this up. I think I've said everything yet.
If a client is investing in crypto, and a high risk client automatically, if me as an individual am investing in crypto, that's got nothing to do with your designated services.
No. The crypto only comes in, I think, when there is linkages to setting up structures like SMSFs.
Yep.
Or if they're, I'm making it up, right, and in some sort of crypto trading company, right? Then there's a higher risk. But if they're trading it themselves, it's really nothing to do with you. The only thing what you might say is if they do hit on high risk, if they're a crypto trader, because they're involved in financial services, you may have a higher risk on that customer type anyway. But it's not just somebody doing some crypto on the side is not what, drives it high.
It reminds me a bit of the cash one. Someone commented on the Facebook group today around the cash transactions. And the banks monitor all cash transactions in and out of bank accounts, and they've been fined billions of dollars for not doing it well. A lot of questions and a lot of concern from people say they have to ongoing monitoring all of the cash transactions within a client AGS. I don't believe that that's a thing that accountants are going to have to do as a part of your ongoing job to monitor every single bank account of every single client for all of their cash transactions. Like that is
that's on the banks. So that's on the banks. The cash component is if you get paid in cash at all, if there's any cash transacting hands. And I think somebody said to me, one of a client said, oh yeah, look, we do have a client who likes to pull out some cash, once in a while, literally one client. But it's the cash that comes into you, not into their bank accounts. That's on the banks to sort that out.
Daniel Harrison's commented about the 2 cents, his 2 cents with the crypto. So yeah, most individuals dealing with crypto is not an issue. Everybody does it. It's not an issue. Again, I think that comes back to that, if there's something dodgy, that's when I come back with the cash. If there's something dodgy seeming happening with cash or crypto, it's the same red flags, whether it's tax avoidance, AML, or terrorist financing. Like if something odd is happening with these transactions, that's your SMR opportunity, and it's also your opportunity to report them to the ATO and TPB. Like you have a responsibility, that's where it comes in. And I think that when those transactions are occurring, that's the vibe check, as I like to call it, comes into play. Yeah, and that's
also important to note. It's also important to note. Sorry to interrupt. SMRs can include any tax evasion suspicions, right? So it's things like it's fraud, scams, money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing, as well as tax evasion, right? So. And as I said before, there's no wrong answers when it comes to SMRs. No one will say to you, you shouldn't have raised one, right? But what you shouldn't do is tell your client you're raising one, because that's a tipping off offence, which is also criminal. Remember
that, everyone. Very important. SMRs are for you only. And AUSTRAC when we send them in. The final part that I just wanted to show is some people have asked, what's it going to look like in Seamlss? So here is a preview of what's happening. Hopefully you can see my screen. So we're going to have the ability to request SMRs.
Can you make it a bit bigger? Can you make it a bit bigger? I think it's a little hard to see on screen. Thank you.
There. So as a part of the review request part, you'll be able to do your PEP, sanction, adverse media. You'll be able to do an IDV with AUSTRAC certification. To make sure that works for you. And then obviously once that has occurred, now I can't, how do I get out? And then once that's occurred, then you'll be able to review the outcomes, and hopefully they come back low more often than not. This is sort of version 1 of doing the requests, ticking the box. And then version 2 after this rollout will be the risk assessment process of having some risks into there. What sort of pricing model are you looking at? Seamlss you already pay for Seamlss, but then the per check price, I think it's around $7 for different checks, 7 to 10, depending on which check and which option you're selecting. But we'll put the pricing on there when we launch in the next few weeks, next week or two, hopefully. But yes, that's the process, and it'll be just per check that you get charged for. It's much the same as everybody else in the market. Hopefully that helps outline that a little bit more for people. Is there any other questions, Ags? Like, we've done pretty good today. I'm trying to keep it as short to an hour as normal. We've got 10 minutes to spare. We've done pretty well. Is there anything you've picked up in the market lately?
Look, I think so many people haven't done much, to be honest with you, which I do find surprising. However,
We're busy.
So I know you're busy, but this isn't small, right? And there is a lot to understand. So I really hope everyone understands the gamut, and absolutely, you can read the legislation, and I hope that's clear. But it's when things come to life, like through technology, through doing some more involved, training seminars that I've been doing with a couple of clients. Like, you need to bring it to life. And until you do bring it to life, I think it will be, certainly when I've talked to a few partners, in my experience, the AML code was absolutely bought in, and she knows exactly what needs to get done, or she knows what she doesn't know, which is also really important. But, all the other partnership, everyone is still a little bit rabbit in headlights. So that's just what I'm kind of seeing, is that there's still a lot of unknown in the space, right? Which comes through exposure and training and doing.
Yeah. Bianca's just asked about setting up a company. Would you do a standard ID check? You're setting up a company, you figure out who the beneficial owners are, who are the directors, who's the connected people. Same as a trust. We talked about it the other day. We didn't put a trust in today, as it is quite complex, but the trustees, the appointer or alternate appointers and things like that, people with control.
Key connected parties and controllers and beneficial owners. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to check those people. Will it be a standard ID check? You would start with a standard ID check and PEP and sanctions check, and ask some questions to confirm where they sit, as we just went through our 7 steps today. And that would be the process. And then when it comes back in different answers and responses and triggers higher requirements, then you would keep uplifting this CDD to the point of you making a decision of whether you're going to keep that client or not. Is that fair to say, Ags? Have I done okay out of that? Am I learning stuff?
Yeah.
Sean Ferrugi has asked about potential beneficiaries in a discretionary trust, thinking in cases where someone has listed a whole extended family 20 years ago. Risk, Sean, it's always going to come back to risk. The trust one is the finicky one. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to be standing here saying that this is the exact answer. And I don't think anyone's giving you an exact answer, because it comes down to circumstances and risk. If I am named as the trust and the primary beneficiary, then I'm the person you're probably going to be checking. But the 100 people I might have distributed to small fractions over 20 years, I'm not going to check all 100 of them. It's the main primary beneficiary.
25% or greater.
Well, the problem with the trust is that it's a discretionary trust, so you get the discretion to who you're going to. So I think also that comes back to the control. Who has control over everything, which comes back to the trustees and the appointer. And if the benefit, like, I can imagine a situation where, Ags, guide me through this, hopefully. I've got a farm. I am the farmer, but I am not the trustee. I'm not the appointer, but I am the primary beneficiary, and I am the dad, and I run the joint. But I am not in the trust apart from the beneficiary, but I am the controlling person. I am the person that gets checked as well. Is that fair to say? Like, if you've discovered that as your process, Clayton gets checked. It's the risk, beneficial owner, and control. Who's going to control where the money goes?
Yeah, so there's 2 aspects of entities that we need to understand. Who stands to gain from the company or the entity that's being set up, and who controls that entity and directs it in a day-to-day that points it to do different things. So, and that sits across all different entity types, whether it's a partnership or a PT or a corporate or a trust. That that principle stands across the board. And because trusts have so many, so if, for instance, in a corporate, you will have all directors would need to be included, as well as beneficial ownerships. Whereas trust, you have a very broad range of different types of, you know, even a settlor potentially, if they put, you know, over 10,000, I think is the key. If they put more than 10,000 in, then the settlor also needs to be ID'd, right? Yeah. Unless they're dead, which you can't ID the dead.
It's the risk. And Sean's asked about people from beneficiaries from 3 to 5 years ago. It comes back to that. I think that you've got to have to ask enough questions of who are the beneficiaries of the trust that would have some control and ownership over that control to determine whether you need to do a AML check on them. Is that fair to say? I feel like someone's asked trusts, you know, it's a big grey area. I wonder, maybe we do need to do a webinar just
on trusts. Yeah, that's what I'm going to start training. Yeah, one of my clients were doing some concerted training sessions, and that's exactly, we're doing one general one, and the next one we're going to be doing is risk assessments, and we're going to delve deep in a couple of different examples, one of which being trusts. Yeah,
trusts. I've got some content. I'll make some. We'll talk after this about that one. I've got some ideas on that. She's asked about whether they've lost a trust deed. Like at the end of the day, that's not AML problems. That's a legal problem. You need to go to a lawyer and work through that.
You will need a trust deed
document provider. Yeah, but like if it's lost, what do you do? Well, that's not an
create a new one.
Yeah, but you need to go to the lawyer and see what the repercussions of that are. Is it going to do a resettlement? Are you going to get stamp duty? Like, there's a whole bunch of issues there outside of AML that you probably need to work through, and it's not going to be talked about on today's webinar. Sorry. I appreciate everyone joining. I've penciled in May the 21st. Hopefully that's okay. Sydney time, as always. Same great place, same great people. Obviously, if you want a free trial with Seamlss, jump on board. If you want help with your program, you get onto Ags before she's booked out and you get no opportunity. So make sure you do that ASAP. There will be a link in the email after today, Ags. I'll send that out as always. Most of all, Ags, everyone's loving the webinars. We'll keep them going if that's okay. Appreciate your time and appreciate all of your knowledge that you're sharing with us.
Thank you. Look, thanks for listening. I mean, I have been banging on the soapbox for a little while, but I do this because I want to keep our families and our kids safe. You know, sextortion, child sexual exploitation, modern slavery. You know, they are real and they're in Australia, and this is what we help prevent by doing this. So that's why I do what I do.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining us. We will come back with some more. Loving the training. Ags has got some training available, so we'll push some of that out in the next email as well, Ags. Appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much.
Sayonara. Thanks, Clayton. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.